Hello, and let's talk about the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on important sectors of the economy. The government announced an omnibus package recently which involved money and food for the poor, which is a welcome step, although definitely inadequate considering the extent of the crisis and the nature of poverty in India. So, what sectors of the economy are likely to be worst hit, and will the government do anything at all to resolve the situation? We'll talk about this in detail, but here are some updates from the COVID-19 front first. There are as many as 2,297 active cases in India now. The number of deaths is at 75. Globally, the number of cases crossed 1 million with over 53,000 deaths. The World Bank has announced $1 billion in emergency funding for India. Meanwhile, estimates vary about the impact of the crisis on the economy. India was already facing record unemployment levels, and the migration that has accompanied this crisis may worsen the situation. Agriculture, construction, and tourism are among the sectors which are likely to be hit hard during the crisis. We talked to senior journalist Aunindyo Chakravarty on this issue. Here's what he had to say. Thank you, Aunindyo, for joining us. So, over the past few weeks, we've been talking about the package that was announced by the government, the kind of impact that the economy has been facing, especially the migrant workers, the unorganized sector. But if we go sector by sector in terms of production, what do you think are the key sectors that are going to be the most affected right now by this crisis?
So I would say that obviously things which are perishable, right, Prashant? Because there are certain things which are pent-up demand. Like when we were talking about on the phone a short while back about what we should discuss today, I told you that my Mixie is not working anymore. So which is a big blow in a lockdown.
Right.
So I'm going to replace it. But right now I can't. So out there in a shop which sells Mixie, it appears that the demand has gone. But it will come back when the lockdown is over. However, if I were buying something from a restaurant, or I would go to a restaurant and eat, it's not as if I'm going to make up by eating a lot more 1 month later. So that is gone. Anything which is a perishable, any travel, if I were flying out somewhere, that is gone. That's not going to happen. Maybe there'll be a sudden surge in business, flights, people going for business. But, people are now kind of working out things like how to work on Zoom. You and I right now are recording from our homes. So I suspect a lot of airlines might have to face this for some time to come, because people will say, why travel? It's much cheaper to have these meetings on Zoom as much as possible. So anything that is perishable is going to be affected. Of course, that also means anything which is a service which is related to perishable. So any trade will be affected, because yes, those goods might still be bought. Right now, I want to buy some Fevicol and I can't, because a stationery shop is not part of an essential service. But I will buy that when the lockdown is over. However, the daily earning cycle of people there is affected. So even if that demand comes back, the shopkeeper provides a service. So trade, anything that is perishable is obviously affected. But things which are where there is a demand, that is a pent-up demand. Therefore, that you might see a sudden surge take place. One problem, you were talking about construction, but before you ask the next question, I think that one thing that one has to keep in mind is that if this lockdown continues for some time, then we'll enter the monsoon season. And we know no construction takes place in monsoon. We know that there's no quarrying, there's no mining in the monsoon season. So that season is affected. So that demand might take some time to come back.
Right. So basically we are looking at, in fact, a considerable amount of the Indian economy, if you look at the service sector as a whole, being considerably hit. And as of now, it doesn't look like the government's package is actually is sorted that way. It seems like an omnibus package as opposed to a sector-specific package which can address specific demands of certain sectors.
I don't think the government intends to give any sector-specific demands to other than maybe corporate. So it's possible that later on CII or FICCI will go and say, this particular sector needs this kind of a tariff tweaking, or you need to write off loans here, or do this and do that. And they'll do that minor changes every now and then. And you and I want to get to know, because governments and corporates actually work pretty closely, right? So there are minor changes, notifications issued every now and then, and most people don't follow it. So there'll be some countervailing duty put on something which is imported, and that will protect a part of industry. I think when it comes to giving specific targeted sops to the poor or handouts to the poor, this government definitely calculates each vote. Now, if if you are selling, let's say, tea or chole kulche at a corner stall, now whatever you're earning, you're not going to say that Modi ji gave it to me, right? But if you cannot earn and you're sitting at home, and we know lakhs of people have already reached villages, and many have been stopped, and many are sitting at home, can't leave. When you get 5 kilos, ultimately you'll be entitled to 5 kilos, and let's say 50% of it is stolen. But even then, you'll still get 2.5, 3 kilos of rice per person every month. You'll get that 500 rupees into your Jan Dhan account. 11 to 12 crore women in rural India have Jan Dhan accounts. About 8 to 9 in urban India have Jan Dhan accounts. So 500 rupees per month coming into that. We know that 80% of India is self-employed, the kind we're talking about, those who are affected. Because self-employment is essentially what? 80% of them are people who work in someone's house. They're probably a plumber, carpenter, itinerant worker, selling chole kulche at a corner shop. And many of the so-called self-employed actually eke out a very miserable living. There's a big increase in the role of car mechanics, car and two-wheeler mechanics, because of the spread of cars and two-wheelers. So that actually has seen an increase in terms of the employment it provides. If there is nothing out on the road, those people are affected. However, when you get a package saying Modi ji gave you free rice, right? So you don't need to target it. You need to actually make sure that there are so many people in so many places who need to be reached this. What is it? I mean, you look at you know about the Panna Pramukhs, right? The people who look at voter lists and tell you who has to do what. So you look at a voter list, create a list of beneficiaries. I think that's how this government works, and that's how that is why it appears from outside that the relief package is random. But to my mind, it is calculated for a certain kind of returns. I know that the government probably didn't expect so many people to, migrant workers to leave and try to go home. But again, why are they trying to go home? Because they know when they reach a village, there is a chance of getting 5 kilos of rice. There is the chance of getting the 2,000 rupees, even if you own only 1 acre of land with 4 other brothers. So, there is that slight bit of cash flow. As I said, 80% of Indian self-employed earn less than 15,000 rupees a month for household income. 80% of self-employed. So that kind of gives you an idea about what self-employment is and how many people are even 4, 5, 6,000 rupees annually makes a difference to them.
Right. So what you're saying is that there may be a political gain for the government in terms of, or at least, if not a gain, at least a feeling among people that they're getting something from the government. But as far as...
Sorry, Prashant. In the old days, they used to say that a flood is always good for governments, right? In incumbent governments, if they manage it well, because they can give direct relief to people. So we know that, we're seeing this reverse migration. But let me tell you, CMI's data for January to April 2019 tells us that compared to 1 year before that, employment in agriculture increased by 51 lakhs. 51 lakh more people worked in agriculture sector, gained jobs in agriculture sector. This is last year's data. And in construction, about 46 lakh people lost their jobs.
Right.
This is again last year's data, the same period, right now that we're sitting, this is last year's data. So this reverse migration has been taking place for the last, I would say, at least 1 year, if not longer. Because of the real estate slowdown, people are going back because somehow they have some connection with the government, where they get some money under PM Awas Yojana. They'll go to the local guy who will arrange a loan through some scheme. You can put up some solar cells and you get some money. You get some money under Kanya, the female education scheme. So there are a certain amount of cash flow which the government directly provides you, which I call the My Baap Sarkar. And in a situation where there is no employment, and we can keep saying GDP is growing at 5%, but when GDP was growing at 10%, what employment did the poor have? So right now, even if GDP grows very slowly, if the government can hand out cash, some amount of relief in terms of food grain outside the market system, they're going to get a certain amount of votes out there. So I think that it is not a random calculation. it's not what economists and analysts see and say, so many people are walking out there on the road, so many people are doing very badly. They always do badly. To assume that they don't is actually our conceit. It's our blindness that we don't see that the poor live like that.
Right. So, but what you also mean is that while this might actually help people tide over things for a very short while, once the immediate crisis goes, there's a question of how to reconstruct.
Yeah. So here's the issue: that does the government intend to reconstruct? How does it intend to reconstruct? Till now, every year, I mean, for the last, I would say, 7, 8 years, every year before budgets, I have written that this is what the government is going to do. Surely the government is going to do this. And everyone's surprised that the government doesn't do anything. Right? And then you say if the government's not doing any of it, what is wrong? Is it a blind government? No, because it is a government which calculates each vote. So it knows who to give what. To get a vote, it assumes that certain people will vote for you even if they lose 10,000 rupees a month. It also knows that where will it get its funds for elections and how to benefit them at what point. It doesn't really look at GDP and things like that we probably as analysts look at. It just looks at how to marginally improve people's lives, especially poor people, and ensure that they think you are the benefactor. This is a very crucial thing. And if you look at it, one of my friends, the journalist Anjali Modi, tweeted that is printing the PM's face on the relief packets being distributed by the BJP currently, is that an essential service? Has that been, because you see, that is what is happening. And I wouldn't say that just the PM. I mean, you look at it in any state, sanitizers have the photographs of chief ministers. So there is a direct political benefit to be gained through giving direct relief, which doesn't work when you say, this sector is doing badly, I'm going to provide something to you. You don't get votes out of that, so why should you?
Right. So, so what you're also saying is that it's going to be a combination of crisis management and targeted, targeted handouts for the near future, definitely.
Yes, because this government has no clue how to create jobs. And it's not just this government, it's not as if the previous government did either. I mean, you look at the UPA period, the growth rate of, I think, jobs growth rate, if you take out the last year, is 0.4% per year. Right? So it's not as if neoliberal policies do not create jobs. Right. You and I know that. Right? So no one's changing that. That is also known. So given that, the only option is to provide handouts. So this is a way to protect private profit by using public money to sustain a certain kind of subsistence existence. Right. That's what I'd call it.
Right.
A subsistence existence amongst people who are outside the market system.
Right.
And I think that's a large number of people, and we don't see that.
Thank you so much, Aunindyo, for speaking to us.
Thank you.
In our next segment, we look at the world of sport. As we know, the Olympics, Wimbledon, and various football leagues are among the tournaments and series that have been cancelled or postponed. The focus right now is obviously on containing the disease and preventing further spread. However, a lot of challenges remain for sports administrators, players, and the millions associated with the sector. We spoke to NewsClick's Leslie Xavier for a bird's eye view of the situation. Thank you, Leslie, for joining us. So we've seen a raft of cancellations, the most prominent being or postponements, most prominent being the Olympics, but also in the field of football, cricket. The tournaments have been either indefinitely postponed or they've been moved to some unknown date. So the key question is that what is, for lack of better word, a global overview right now? Because sport is something that it's very difficult to visualize, conceive of it not happening. I mean, except for wars. I mean, the last time probably there was such a severe disruption was World War II maybe. And otherwise, public sport has always been something that is very much in our hearts and our minds. It's very present. And now we have this very unprecedented scenario. So from the perspective of sports persons, the people you have been talking to, from the perspective of administrators itself, what do you see as the long-term impact?
The impact is already here, I would say, because firstly, the thing is the cancellation is, there is a lot of stakeholders and factors involved into organizing sport, because sport is not exactly just played out on the field anymore. It's broadcast across the world. So stakeholders there, advertisers there, network slots, contracts, and then all from there onwards to all the infrastructure and support structure involved in organizing a sport on the stadium. It's immense. So before getting into the larger picture of how sports, organizational sport, as an organized sport, is being impacted here globally and at a local level, I would like to first get into the picture that sports is not just about these organizers or the sports persons. Sport in a stadia is also about the very highly unorganized sector who is large involved in working and making it happen.
Right.
So be it a vendor outside on the stadiums selling peanuts, to flags, to painting your face, to jerseys, and this is something that I had addressed in my weekly cricket column as well. It's not about IPL anymore, because IPL will survive. I mean, BCCI will have minimized hits because they have their events covered by insurance. So they will get their money, they will get part of their money, they will have minimum disruption as such. But who will pay the guy who was selling a cap to the spectators walking into the stadium? And I've spoken to many during my couple of events that I've covered just to get the mood of how these guys create. And they bank on cricket and they bank on IPL to make a living. So this is across the world. So that is the biggest impact as far as, I mean, on a very societal level, social level, as far as people making a living out of sport is concerned. It starts from there.
Right.
And then getting into Olympics. So obviously it's a huge setback to start with for Japanese economy, because they had invested billions into this organizing, setting up infrastructure, setting up other things around, not just sporting infrastructure. I'm talking about the city sprucing up for this thing, the public transport infrastructure. All these things are on hold now. Just that Japanese, as far as these things are concerned, there is always a legacy planning involved, since we are talking about Japanese and not like our case where we have stadiums laying idle and into disuse. So at some point in the future, it will be used for the larger good, for sports, for other stuff. But at this point, it is major, and I believe that it's not sport, it's not Olympic related as such, but generally the world is gonna go under in that sense. And Olympics postponed, and one of the first major sporting spectacle that was postponed was the leagues. And you may have read about this. In Italy, the biggest spread happened.
The Bergamo football match.
Bergamo. So the Champions League match that happened in Milan. So football went into a clampdown before Olympics are even thought about cancelling it. I would say the Olympic movement was a little behind, because they should have given clarity at the start itself. Okay, this is unprecedented, but they were playing a wait and watch, just like many governments that you know. And so this has impact on the calendars in the coming months. It also has impact on, because see, all this sport at a larger scale, it happens because sponsors are involved, and sponsors won't have money because the entire economy is going down, companies are going down, all the people who have invested in sport may not have the money to invest it in the future. They will be rebuilding, they will be consolidating their businesses, they will be trying to pay the salaries of their staffers, things like that. So money is going to be at a premium in the coming months, and sport, how does sport take it forward from here, maybe scaling down, which is actually not so bad in that sense, because of late the sporting bubble was getting huge and huge and huge and unnecessarily huge in a way, because it was bound to burst. It's burst on a global scale because of a pandemic. That's coincidence, but this was anyways getting too big to be sustained.
Right. So a key question would be, for instance, in the immediate aftermath of the crisis, what priorities, or which is something probably that planning should be going on even now, that how do administrators in a very general level. I mean, I'm not talking about one specific sport.
Yeah.
But what kind of focus do administrators try to sort of have to ensure that, for instance, that young talent continues to come in and that events, that the cycle does not get disrupted? Because I don't think we've ever seen anything like this.
Yeah, so again, before let's get to the specifics in a way. The latest cancellation was Wimbledon. Again, a huge. If you look at history and heritage, a major sporting event in the world, and the direct implication beyond professional players being affected by it is the grassroots tennis system in England. So that is hugely connected and invested with their one of the biggest Grand Slams in the world, and the grass. So that gets disrupted. What the organizers are trying to do, or what the British tennis fraternity is trying to do, is to get it back as soon as possible. They have cancelled it, so it's not like they are trying to postpone it and hold it in the coming months or something. I will commend them for being very transparent about this, because this is not something that you can tinker around with. Cancellation, solid move, solid decision. Something French Open and the US Open has not done. French Open specifically, because French Open comes before Wimbledon. So such solid and hard measures have to be taken to start with, to give clarity that this has happened, but we have clamped down. Now we will plan. So think tanks are working. There is no solid. Obviously the priority is not when to start playing. The priority is different because the world is suffering.
Right.
But then the work is on. And specifically, if you talk about Olympics, these guys are trying to figure out the logistics and the changes and the calendar. They are massively into conversations with the stakeholders, the sponsors, the Japanese government on the side, because that's not the major priority, as you know, because major priority is to contain the virus, major priority is to fight back, major priority is to find a vaccine, things like that. Today's latest, UEFA has come out, say they are looking at a July window to restart the leagues which are pending this year, UEFA Champions League, because then if it goes beyond that, obviously they'll have to call off this thing, because it overlaps with the next this thing. I would say that would be again a little bit of they're taking it with a pinch of salt, because it's wishful thinking, I would say, because it's not just about restarting a tournament like that or a league like that. No, the logistics. So maybe they are planning closed door matches, right, things like that. So, but again, resumption of sport, though it's because it raises spirit, it raises hope. Sport always has that power with humankind. So it is important in this time, but it is also important that we take it with by kind of taking into consideration what the immediate priorities are. So across the world, stadiums have been converted into hospitals and containment facilities, so that the immediate crisis is met, and then sport takes that kind of a social stance and social relevance in these times, and then from there organize stuff. Right.
Thank you so much, Leslie, for talking to us. That's all we have in this episode of Let's Talk. We'll be back on Monday with the latest news developments of the day. Until then, keep watching NewsClick.